For thousands of years, Egypt depended on a river it could not fully command. The Nile was the country's lifeline, but it was also unpredictable. Each year, the river rose during the late summer and spread across the valley, carrying water, minerals, and fine fertile silt from its upstream drainage basin. That annual flood made farming possible in a dry landscape where rainfall could never support a large agricultural civilization on its own. But the same flood that gave life could also bring disaster. Too much water could wipe out crops and damage settlements. Too little water could mean drought, hunger, and economic crisis. The Aswan High Dam was Egypt's attempt to end that ancient uncertainty and turn the Nile from a seasonal force into a controlled national system. Before the High Dam, Egypt had already tried to regulate the Nile with the Aswan Low Dam, completed in 1902. That earlier dam was an important achievement, but it was never enough to completely control the river. It could store some water and improve irrigation, yet the annual flood still passed largely down the valley. Over time, the Low Dam reached its maximum practical use. Egypt's population kept growing, agriculture needed to become more reliable, and the economy depended heavily on crops such as cotton. The country needed more than short-term regulation. It needed a reservoir large enough to store water over multiple years, protect against extreme flood seasons, and provide a reserve during low water periods. The Aswan High Dam was built between 1960 and 1970, about 7 kilometers upstream from the older dam. It was developed by the Egyptian government with major help from the Soviet Union, which made the project both an engineering effort and a symbol of mid-20th century politics. For Egypt, the dam represented independence, modernization, and national ambition. It was not designed to solve just one problem. It was meant to control flooding, support year-round irrigation, create a huge water reserve, and produce hydroelectric power for a more industrial economy. In other words, the dam was a single structure carrying several national goals at once: food security, energy, development, and control over Egypt's most important natural resource. Unlike a narrow concrete dam wedged between steep cliffs, the Aswan High Dam is an enormous embankment dam. It was built as a massive engineered barrier of earth and rock, designed to resist the pressure of a vast reservoir behind it. When completed, it was one of the largest dams of its kind and was considered the tallest earthen dam in the world, surpassing the Chatuge Dam in the United States. Its design came from Nikolai Alexandrovich Malyshev of the Moscow-based Hydro Project Institute. The project included advanced features for its time, including a very deep grout curtain below the base. That underground barrier helped limit seepage, a critical concern when holding back the flow of the Nile on such a huge scale. The dam's most dramatic physical result was Lake Nasser, the enormous reservoir created behind it. A reservoir this size is more than a lake. It is stored time. Water that once surged north during flood season could now be held back and released later when farmers, cities, and power systems needed it. This changed the basic rhythm of Egyptian water management. Instead of relying mainly on one annual flood, Egypt could plan water releases across seasons and even across years. In a country where most fertile land lies close to the Nile, that storage mattered enormously. It gave planners a buffer against both abundance and shortage, turning unpredictable river flow into a managed supply. Flood control was one of the strongest reasons for building the High Dam. Historically, high water years could be devastating. A flood that was slightly too large might damage fields. A flood that was far too large could destroy whole crops and overwhelm communities. By capturing floodwater upstream, the dam allowed Egypt to reduce the danger of uncontrolled downstream flooding. Water could be released more gradually instead of arriving all at once. This was a major change in how Egypt dealt with risk. The country no longer had to wait and hope that the Nile would rise to the right level. Engineers and officials could measure, store, and release water according to human plans. But controlling floods also meant interrupting one of the Nile's oldest gifts. The annual flood did not simply bring water, it brought natural nutrients and minerals that refreshed the soil along the floodplain and delta. For ancient and traditional agriculture, that renewal was part of the system. Once the high dam trapped water in Lake Nasser, much of the river's sediment settled behind the dam instead of continuing downstream. This did not make irrigation impossible, but it changed the bargain. Egypt gained predictable water control, yet lost part of the natural fertilizing process that had supported farming for millennia. The dam turned an ecological cycle into an engineered one. Irrigation was another central promise. As Egypt's population expanded, the country needed to protect existing farmland and make agriculture more productive. With the high dam, water could be stored during wet periods and released during dry ones, supporting more reliable cultivation. This was especially important for economically valuable crops like cotton, which required dependable water supplies. The dam gave Egypt the ability to think beyond one flood season at a time. Farmers and planners could depend more on scheduled irrigation and less on the natural rise of the river. Yet that reliability also created new dependence on canals, releases, maintenance, and technical management. The river became less seasonal, but the system became more complex. The high dam was also built as a power project. Hydroelectricity was central to Egypt's industrialization plans because modern industry requires reliable energy. By sending water through turbines, the dam could convert the Nile's flow into electricity without burning fuel at the point of generation. This connected the river directly to factories, urban growth, and state-led development. For the Egyptian government, hydroelectric power was not just a technical benefit. It was a symbol of modernization, the idea that a country could use engineering to turn a natural force into national strength. The dam therefore became part of a broader vision in which infrastructure would drive economic transformation. The Aswan High Dam deeply affected Egypt's economy and culture because it changed how the country imagined the Nile. For most of Egyptian history, the river's flood cycle shaped calendars, harvests, settlement patterns, and political power. After the high dam, the Nile was increasingly treated as an operating system, measured, regulated, stored, and released. That shift brought confidence. It suggested that drought and flood could be managed through science and planning. But it also concentrated responsibility. If nature once decided the timing of the flood, now institutions and infrastructure had to make those decisions. Control brought stability, but it also required constant management and long-term technical competence. One of the long-term engineering challenges is sediment buildup inside the reservoir. Every river carries material, and over time that material settles when moving water slows down. Behind the Aswan High Dam, sediment that once traveled downstream accumulates in Lake Nasser. Engineers understood that this process would eventually reduce storage capacity. Even so, conservative estimates suggested the dam would provide at least 200 years of service. That number reveals how mega-projects are often judged. They are not eternal fixes, they are long-term trade-offs. The dam bought Egypt generations of water control, irrigation security, and power, while also accepting that the reservoir would slowly change as silt collected behind it. The story of the Aswan High Dam is not simply about triumph or damage. It is about the cost and power of controlling nature at national scale. The dam protected Egypt from dangerous floods, stored water for difficult years, supported irrigation, and generated electricity. At the same time, it changed the ancient relationship between the Nile, the soil, and the people who farmed along its banks. It replaced a natural cycle with an engineered system. That is why the dam remains one of the defining projects of modern Egypt. It did not merely block a river. It reshaped the country's economy, its landscape, and its future by changing what the Nile could be. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.